David Berg with more Voices of Montana.
Just 6 minutes until the top of the hour on this Thursday morning broadcast of the Voices of Montana. One of those voices that I want to be well heard is Lee Bruner, an attorney, candidate for Attorney General. That, Lee, that's important because this idea of gun rights is going to be a major issue on the Attorney General's desk, isn't it?
It is. I was actually the first candidate to jump on this issue. I have some friends in Missoula who watch the Second Amendment very closely, as I do, and I got an email from them prior to Thanksgiving saying, Lee, have you seen this case out of D.C.? And I actually spent all Thanksgiving weekend reading the cases and reading the briefs, much to my wife's chagrin, but it's an area that I care about a lot. And I wrote to Mike McGrath on Monday, right after Thanksgiving. My letter, the original letter, is still out on my website, leebruner.com, and urged him to get involved in this case. I was the first candidate to do that, and it's one that's very important to me, and it's one that's going to be very important to the next Attorney General, because this is not going to resolve every question. The D.C. gun ban case, the Heller case, is not going to answer every question there is about the Second Amendment. It's merely going to give us a direction that we need to go to resolve a whole slew of questions, and the Montana Attorney General has to be right up there defending the rights of Montanans. That's the Attorney General's job. It's going to be critical to that next Attorney General's person.
I've got another call for you before we wind up the show. David is calling from Polson. David, good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, I'd just like to, I don't know if this has been covered. I haven't heard the whole program, but it is my belief that rights are granted to free men by God and guaranteed by the government. And if we take God out of the equation, then we just become a bunch of clever devils, and we will soon go into a state of tyranny.
Well, that's very likely, David, and I appreciate your comment. Lee, do you have a comment on that?
Well, we are, David. I agree with you, and I agree with you philosophically. But we are a nation of laws, and if we can keep those laws consistent with those beliefs that you hold, that leads to a much better government. And if we move away from that, then, as you say, we end up in serious problems.
Lee, speaking of a nation of laws, that's why we have a Supreme Court. That's why the Supreme Court is now defining or trying to define the Second Amendment for us. But let's talk about the Supreme Court just a little bit. We have liberals and we have conservatives on that court. During the next term of a president, we're going to have a chance to replace possibly certainly two, or possibly three members of that court. Whether they're liberal or conservative is going to make a difference as to who the president is at that time. I'm not sitting here endorsing one person over another, but this is something that you've got to think about when you're selecting a president in November.
Absolutely. And, we've been talking a lot of callers called in we're talking about the language of the Second Amendment. What does a well-regulated militia mean? What does the right of the people mean? And the constitutional theory that we've been using, or we've been talking about today, is textualism and original intent. And there are Supreme Court justices who use that. Justice Roberts and Justice Scalia are two great champions of that. There are other Supreme Court justices who argue for what's called a living constitution, a constitution that changes and the meaning changes as the needs and the ideas of society change. And those are two very different schools of thought. And it's very important. I think it's critical that when people make their selection for who they're going to look for president, that they consider that, and they consider that president's philosophy on those issues and what kind of people they will put in. Because once you're on the Supreme Court, you're appointed for life, and it has a huge impact on our society and the structure of our society.
No question about it. And, I would even say, as far as that goes, I was talking about electing a president who's going to be appointing Supreme Court justices. Even here in Montana, we've got to get people who think right in the legislature, the people who think right in the governor's office and in all elected offices here, including the Attorney General, just what you were saying a little while ago. Because this issue and many others that are just equally important to Montanans are going to keep coming up. The people that propose these things don't give up. They're relentless.
That's right. I make a comment that a lot of good people put a lot on the line to get our rights for us, and we need to be equally as vigilant in protecting them.
Well said. Lee Bruner, candidate for Attorney General, an attorney here in Montana, and a Montana boy, by the way. Thanks for listening. We've got to go. We're out of time.
You've been listening to the Voices of Montana with your host, David Berg. The comments and opinions heard are those of the host or callers and are not necessarily those of the station, our sponsors, or the Northern News Network. You're invited to join us again for Voices of Montana.